money on the other.
But at a wrap party for a movie, his secret life is about to become public.
They said, we have an interview, Mike. The local television wants to talk to you a little bit on the way out. And I was tired. I said, okay. Brian Ross, who was an NBC reporter. I didn't recognize him. I didn't know who he was. And he starts saying, you know, talking a little bit about the party and so on and so forth. And the next thing out of his mouth,
the FBI says you're a member of the Colombo Mafia family.
I knew, you know, where he was coming from at that point. My partner got upset. He jumped up and ran away.
Here to talk to the kids.
And I just answered the questions.
Like I said, the FBI can allege and say whatever they like. They've been doing it for many, many years.
You know, it was, that's when it started to really unravel.
Francese's outing on national TV soon draws heat from the law. In 1985, prosecutors charged Francese with 87 counts of racketeering, fraud, and tax evasion. He faces a life sentence.
I knew that if I did go to trial and lose, my life was over.
His lawyers cut a deal.
We negotiated a plea agreement where I would get a 10-year prison sentence. Figured back then they had parole. I would do 5 on the 10 maybe. I had a $15 million restitution, a $5 million forfeiture of assets, and went off to do my time.
Francese serves 6 years. Before he goes to jail, he gets married and makes a decision.
I met this young girl who I was, you know, really enamored with. You know, if I were going to spend time with her and have a future with her, it wouldn't work with this life because they wouldn't leave me alone.
Francese vows to quit the mafia. Up till now, the only way out of the mob is in a wooden box. But by the 1990s, rather than do serious jail time for RICO crimes, many gangsters begin to turn away from Cosa Nostra into the arms of the FBI.
The main part of the deal is that they were going to keep me alive. I guess that's a pretty good deal.
It's the biggest sin in the Mafia's 10 Commandments, and mobsters learn about it at their mother's knee. Whatever else you do, don't rub shoulders with the law.
Even as kids growing up, we didn't rat each other out. It was just the way it was, you know. You didn't go and run and tell your aunt what your cousin did or whatever it might have been.
Non si fanno comparati o patti con gli altri sbirri. Never be seen with cops.
The Mafia's commandments are designed to remind mobsters to do everything they can to avoid being seen with cops.
Now, I grew up hating the police. My dad always taught me growing up that, you know, you can't want to be a police officer or like the police because they took an oath to lock up their own parents and their relatives. So I grew up really hating the police.
But when tradition fails, bosses have another tool at their disposal. Fear. In the battle against organized crime, FBI agent Patrick Colgan witnesses firsthand how Gambino boss John Gotti intimidates his subordinates.
I did have an informant very close to Gotti, but he was petrified of Gotti. Absolutely petrified. Gotti would kill you simply because he got up on the wrong side of the bed, much less become worried that one of his henchmen were cooperating with law enforcement.
When Agent Colgan's informant is identified in court, he skips town, never to be seen again.
This gentleman had a wife and a 10-year-old son. Gave them up. He hasn't been seen in 25 years. Out of fear. Out of fear.
The Witness Protection Program is set up in 1970 to offer mobsters the chance of trading information in return for protection. Since then, nearly 10,000 of them have signed up. In 1980, Lucchese associate Henry Hill is busted for heroin trafficking.
Is it the fan? Is it the fan? And I knew I was a dead man then. Because if we ever went to trial, all of that stuff would have come out.
Police wiretaps have Hill implicating himself and his criminal bosses.
He was all over the wiretaps. They had like 2 million feet of wiretaps, tape recordings, and those guys would have been indicted too. So I knew that I was, completely a dead man.
Facing the prospect of life behind bars or death at the hands of his mafia bosses, Hill accepts an offer of help from the FBI.
It was the best day of my life. It was. I mean, I was so relieved. When they said I wouldn't put you in a witness protection program.
Under new identities, Hill and his family are moved to undisclosed locations in Nebraska, Kentucky, and Washington. In exchange, Hill testifies against 50 members of the Lucchese crime family.
And that's when I made the deal with them, and, I give them a lot of credit. They took care of me. The government did take care of me at the end.
Hill's decision to talk is still an unusual act in the early 80s. But within 10 years, gangsters begin to break the commandment about talking to cops in growing numbers. From the early 70s to early 90s, federal convictions for organized crime jump by an astonishing 450%. Thanks to RICO, fear of the law outweighs the power of the mob.
One of the reasons I see the life kind of crumbling from within is because it was a life that was built largely on fear. And when the fear of the government in the United States became more powerful than the fear of the boss and the rest of the family, what happened? These guys started to cave in, started to tell, started to make deals, and it's happening now in record numbers.
Traditions that have governed the mafia for decades are fading fast. Young mobsters no longer believe the mafia is worth doing serious jail time for.
When they got jammed up, and they're looking at a racketeering indictment and 40 years in jail, and the mafia is no longer a way of life, but a way to make money, now you make a business decision. How do I cut my losses? Let me cooperate. And so we've seen it again and again and again. In Philadelphia, probably more than any other city, but per capita, we've probably had more cooperating witnesses, made guys on the witness stand, than any other mob family in America.
In Philadelphia, no one is a bigger mob rat than ex-cop Ron Previte.
I did whatever I had to do to survive all my life because I was the consummate hustler.
In 1993, Philly boss John Stanfa makes Previte his bodyguard. Big Ron repays Stanfa's trust by wearing a wire. Previte has no faith in the mafia's rules.
Well, probably at one time before I was around and you were around, the rules may have applied. But I guarantee those rules were broke every day of the week. Twice on Sunday.
In 1995, Previte's evidence helps the FBI convict John Stanfa on charges of racketeering and murder. The Philly boss is sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms. With Stanfa behind bars, Previte targets Stanfa's rival, Skinny Joey Merlino. In 1999, the ex-cop's testimony sends Merlino down for drug trafficking. He's still in jail. Previte's loyalty is only to himself.
When you're a thug and a gangster, what rules do you have? You're stealing, you're robbing, they're selling drugs, you're doing everything wrong. The truest expression I ever heard is there's no honor among thieves.
Perhaps because it has strayed from the commandments that once governed it, the mafia in America today is on the ropes. In place of honor, loyalty, and respect, there's only greed.
All these guys are interested in is making money. They're not interested in all this respect no more.
The mafia has lost touch with its origins.
All the rules were out the window.
By the 1990s, the younger generation of mobsters are no longer loyal to the idea of the mafia. To them, the 10 Commandments have no meaning.
If you talk to half of these guys that run around today, you showed them that list, they wouldn't know what you were talking about.
The mafia's golden age is over.
I think back in the 40s and 50s, those rules were used and they applied. And loyalty and honor were a part of that. And This generation, as we come to the end of the 20th century, into the 21st century, none of that applied anymore. It's not a part of who the experience is. Now it's about making money. It's not about being part of a secret society or an honored society, you know, men of honor. I mean, that's a phrase that you still hear, but I don't think it means anything anymore.
Some former mobsters feel betrayed.
There are guys who are on the street who gave their life to that life that are broke. And you know what? No one cares they're broke. No one cares that they participated in 2 or 3 murders for them. Or maybe they saved their life.
The old mafia insurance policies are no longer paying up. When a mobster goes to jail, his family is supposed to be looked after.
One of them brought my wife $50 one day. A guy who I probably made $2 million with. Brought my wife $50.
Tony's bosses abandon the guiding spirit behind Cosa Nostra. The mafia takes care of its own. Disillusioned, many mobsters decide to quit the rackets. Today, Henry Hill has left the Witness Protection Program. Safe in the knowledge that he's outlived his enemies, Hill paints and writes for a living.
You know, now that I look back at it, I'm so detached from that life. I can't believe, you know, when I see, you know, that stuff on television or the movies, you know, how I was a part of that thing. And I just find it so weird, you know.
Gene Milano is still in witness protection, grateful for the second chance it offers.
I think there's a lot of people out there that just don't know how good it is to go to work every day. You know the paycheck you're getting. You know your parameters. You're spending what you can spend, what you can't. That's lost in that life.
But some find it hard to let go.
Regrets that I walked away from the life. You know, I really struggled with that for many years. I felt like I betrayed an oath, even though I knew the oath was wrong. It was so ingrained and embedded in me that I had a real hard time dealing with that.
Michael France's never informed on fellow mobsters. He's done something worse. He's revealed Cosa Nostra's beating heart.
What I know about the life, obviously, is in my mind and my heart. I'm not going to forget it to a large degree. And you're in it for life. That's the understanding.
Even in its twilight years, the mafia doesn't forgive or forget.
I don't underestimate those guys. And I guess if they were really determined at this point, I could